Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 223. Chapter 223. One of the doctors came out of the tent in a blood-stained apron, holding a cigar between his thumb and little finger of one of his small blood-stained hands, so as not to smear it. He raised his head and looked about him, but above the level of the wounded men. He evidently wanted a little respite. After turning his head from right to left for some time, he sighed and looked down. "All right, immediately," he replied to a dresser who pointed Prince Andrew out to him, and he told them to carry him into a tent. Murmurs arose among the wounded who were waiting. "It seems that even in the next world only the generals get to have a chance," remarked one. Prince Andrew was carried in and laid on a table that had only just been cleared, in which a dresser was washing down. Prince Andrew could not make out distinctly what was in that tent. The pitiful groans from all sides and the torturing pain in his thigh, stomach, and back distracted him. All he saw about him merged into a general impression of naked, bleeding human bodies that seemed to fill the whole of the low tent, as a few weeks previously, on that hot August day, such bodies had filled the dirty pond beside the Smolensk road. Yes, it was the same flesh, the same chair à canon, the sight of which had even then filled him with horror, as a presentiment. There were 3 operating tables in the tent. 2 were occupied, and on the 3rd they placed Prince Andrew. For a little while he was left alone and involuntarily witnessed what was taking place on the other 2 tables. On the nearest one sat a Tartar, probably a Cossack, judging by the uniform thrown down beside him. 4 soldiers were holding him, and a spectacled doctor was cutting into his muscular brown back. "Oh, he grunted, and suddenly lifting up his swarthy, snub-nosed face with its high cheekbones and baring his white teeth, he began to wriggle and twitch his body, and utter piercing, ringing, and prolonged yells. On the other table, round about which many people were crowding, a tall, well-fed man lay on his back with his head thrown back. His curly hair, its color, and the shape of his head seemed strangely familiar to Prince Andrew. Several dressers were pressing on his chest to hold him down. One large, white, plump leg twitched rapidly all the time with a feverish tremor. The man was sobbing and choking convulsively. 2 doctors, one of whom was pale and trembling, were silently doing something to this man's other leg, the gory leg. When he had finished with the Tartar, whom they covered with an overcoat, the spectacled doctor came up to Prince Andrew, wiping his hands. He glanced at Prince Andrew's face and quickly turned away. "Undress him! What are you waiting for?" he cried angrily to the dressers. His very first, remotest recollections of childhood came back to Prince Andrew's mind when the dressers, with sleeves rolled up, began hastily to undo the buttons of his clothes and undressed him. The doctor bent over the wound, felt it, and sighed deeply. Then he made a sign to someone, and the torturing pain in his abdomen caused Prince Andrew to lose consciousness. When he came to himself, the splintered portions of his thigh bone had been extracted, the torn flesh cut away, and the wound bandaged. Water was being sprinkled on his face. As soon as Prince Andrew opened his eyes, the doctor bent over, kissed him silently on the lips, and hurried away. After the sufferings he had been enduring, Prince Andrew enjoyed a blissful feeling, such as he had not experienced for a very long time. All the best and happiest moments of his life, especially his earliest childhood, when he used to be undressed and put into bed, and when leaning over him his nurse sang to him, and he, burying his head in the pillow, felt happy in the mere consciousness of life. All this returned to his memory, not merely as something past, but as something present. The doctors were busily engaged with the wounded man, the shape of whose head seemed familiar to Prince Andrew. They were lifting him up and trying to quiet him. "Show it to me! Oh! Oh!" His frightened moans could be heard, subdued by suffering and broken sobs. Hearing those moans, Prince Andrew wanted to weep. Whether because he was dying without glory, or because he was sorry to part with life, or because of those memories of a childhood that could not return, or because he was suffering, and others were suffering, and that man near him was groaning so piteously, he felt like weeping childlike, kindly, in almost happy tears. The wounded man was shown his amputated leg, stained with clotted blood, and with the boot still on. "Oh, oh!" he sobbed, like a woman. The doctor who had been standing beside him, preventing Prince Andrew from seeing his face, moved away. "My God, what is this? Why is he here?" said Prince Andrew to himself. In the miserable, sobbing, enfeebled man whose leg had just been amputated, he recognized Anatoly Kuragin. Men were supporting him in their arms and offering him a glass of water, but this trembling, swollen lips could not grasp its rim. Anatoly was sobbing painfully. "Yes, it is he. Yes, that man is somehow closely and painfully connected with me," thought Prince Andrew, not yet clearly grasping what he saw before him. "What is the connection of that man with my childhood and my life?" he asked himself without finding an answer. And suddenly, a new unexpected memory from that realm of pure and loving childhood presented itself to him. He remembered Natasha as he had seen her for the first time at the ball in 1810, with her slender neck and arms, and with a frightened, happy face ready for rapture, and love and tenderness for her, stronger and more vivid than ever, awoke in his soul. He now remembered the connection that existed between himself and this man, who was dimly gazing at him through tears that filled his swollen eyes. He remembered everything. An ecstatic pity and love for that man overflowed his happy heart. Prince Andrew could no longer restrain himself and wept tender, loving tears for his fellow men, for himself, and for his own and their heirs. Compassion, love of our brothers, for those who love us and for those who hate us, love of our enemies. Yes, that love which God preached on earth and which Princess Mary taught me and I did not understand. That is what made me sorry to part with life. That is what remained for me had I lived. But now it is too late. I know it. That concludes my reading of chapter 223. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 223. Without fear of death. And may not young men die as well as old? Gremio asks in Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. In today's chapter, Tolstoy not only answers that question in the affirmative, he also provides some fairly gruesome supporting illustrations. Prince Andrew, to a degree greater than even the citizens of Florida, is in a bad state. He's been gravely injured by French shelling and has been removed to a field hospital where a cigar-smoking, blood-stained doctor attends to him against a background of screaming, groaning, and dying fellow soldiers. You'll recall that while his regiment passed through Bald Hills earlier, he saw some soldiers bathing in a dirty pond there and mused that they were merely cannon fodder. Well, he was right. Little did he know that he was too. The medics place him on one of the 3 operating tables. He looks around. On one of the tables, he sees a young Tartar. On the other, he sees a man who looks strangely familiar. As Andrew undergoes his own surgery, this familiar man's cries and frightened moans permeate the room. When the doctors attending to this man finally clear away, it is revealed that he is none other than Andrew's rival, Anatoly Kuragin. Andrew has spent the last few months seething with hatreds for this man. Anatoly has essentially guided his every action ever since the Natasha incident. In fact, Prince Andrew only rejoined the military because of his spite for Anatoly. When Prince Andrew finally finds Anatoly, however, all that hate dissolves amidst the universal solvent of death. There's no hatred left in him. Instead, Prince Andrew weeps like a child in pity and love for Anatoly Kuragin. He thinks of his life and the lesson he never learned, the lesson his dear sister tried to teach him. Compassion, love of our brothers, for those who love us and for those who hate us, love of our enemies. This is a lesson probably better learned late than never, but one can't resist the suspicion that Andrew isn't at least a little upset that he didn't learn it sooner. If only he had applied the lessons of Marcus Aurelius to consider oneself dead, and then live the rest of your life living well. Prince Andrew doesn't want to die now. He wants to live while he has this understanding. Across the room, Anatoly isn't faring any better. He's raging against his own death. In so doing, he completes life as he lived it, unvirtuously, and as a moral coward. Daily meditation. But the ship is sinking. What then have I to do? I do the only thing that I can, not to be drowned full of fear, nor screaming, nor blaming God, but knowing that what has been produced must also perish. For I am not an immortal being, but a man, a part of the whole, as an hour is a part of the day. I must be like the hour, and pass like the hour. Epictetus, The Discourses. And that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 223 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening with me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 224. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.